In the last video, I demonstrated two simple JPQL queries. The first selected all records from the artist table with all the associated data. The second used a where clause to limit the records returned to just those whose name contains some version of Steve in it. Let's say now I just really wanted a list of artist names and not all the data for an artist, so not the artist ID or album names. Like SQL, I can specify the data to be returned to a subset of data available. Instead of specifying each column name in the query, I specify the field name on the entity. To demonstrate this, I've again got the JPA project open to the main query class. I'll copy the getArtists JPQL method, pasting a copy just below it. First, I'll change the name on the pasted copy of this method to getArtistNames. Next, in the JPQL statement, instead of specifying just select A in my query, I'll instead specify select A.artistName. In the main method, I'll set up a local variable using the var keyword. I'll call this variable names and assign it to the result from my new method, passing it the same arguments as I did with the previous method. I'll print each element in that list. I'll run this code. I get an exception. It's a class cast exception, and it says a string cannot be cast to class dev lpa music.artist. So when you specify anything more than the entity alias itself, you have to specify a different type as the return type. It doesn't just populate an artist entity with the fields you specified, which you might have expected. I'll change the return type of the getArtistNames method to a list of string. And actually, I also have to change the type specified in the createQuery method, changing that from artist.class to string.class. I'll run the code now. Now I can see just the artist names, but I've lost the association with the artist entity. If you need to get multiple columns, this becomes even more complicated. Fortunately, you can use a tuple to retrieve these elements and map them back to your artist entity if you need to do that. Maybe you've heard of a tuple in other programming languages. In this case, a JPA tuple is an ordered collection of values retrieved from a database query. It's like a lightweight data container, offering more flexibility than simply returning entire entities or raw object arrays. You can think of it as a mini record holding just the specific data you need from the database without the overhead of full entity objects. I'll change the getArtistNames method again. This time I'll return a list of tuple. The tuple class is part of the Jakarta.persistence package. I'll change the type passed to the createQuery method from string.class to tuple.class. I'll also change the statement in the JPQL variable, adding a.artistID before the artist name there. I'll add a new line after the from clause and before the where clause. I'll run this code. You can see the artist ID and the artist name in this output. Now I could have simply used an array of object as the return type, but the tuple has some nice built-in functionality. You saw that its toString method will print each element in the tuple. In addition, each element in a tuple has a name that allows you to access elements using meaningful names, improving code clarity. Tuples can be seamlessly integrated with the Stream API for efficient data processing and transformations, leveraging Java's functional programming capabilities. Let's take this example one step further, and this time return a stream from the getArtistNames method. This requires just two changes to the getArtistNames method. I'll change list to stream in the method declaration, and I'll return query.getResultStream. If I run the code now, it works just the same as if I'd returned a list, because for each is a terminal operation on stream. Let's next map this tuple to an artist entity in the main method. I'll remove the for each statement that's currently there. I'll start with the stream variable, which is called names. I'll call map on the stream, and for each tuple in the stream, I'll instantiate a new artist. I've got a constructor on artist that takes an artist ID and an artist name. I can get elements from a tuple using the get method, passing an index and specific class that should be returned, so I'll pass 0 first, then integer.class here for the ID. If I don't specify the class, an object is returned, and I can cast that, so I'll do that for the artist name in this case. Now I'll just print each artist instance. I'll run this code. You can see from this output that I mapped my values to the artist entity, and I don't have any albums in this case. If you want to retrieve data from a tuple using a name, your JPQL query needs to include field aliases. I'll add these next to the JPQL variable in my getArtistNames method. I'll use ID as the alias for artist ID and just name for artist name. You can specify an alias simply by including it directly after the field name, which I'll do for ID. Alternately, you can use the keyword as to specify an alias, which I'll do after artist name. In the main method, I can now use the aliases ID and name in the get methods. I'll replace the number 0 with the text literal ID, and I'll replace the number 1 on the next line with the text literal name. This makes the code a bit easier to understand, I think. I can rerun this code and I'll get the same result as before. The tuple is a simple collection mechanism that can be used with JPQL to return data without relying on a specific entity class. You've seen that the elements can be named. Data types of the elements can also be queried through methods on each tuple element, if need be. I'm going to comment this code out right now in the main method because I want to get back to querying a full artist record. In the next example, I'll get all the artists who have a greatest hits album. First, I'll change the regular expression in the main method from %stev% to %greatesthits%. Since my JPQL statement is trying to match on artist name and not album name, I have to change that statement in the getArtists JPQL method. I need to include a join to query by album. Importantly, this is a JPQL join and not a SQL join. First, I'll comment out the JPQL statement I now have in this method. I'll create a new JPQL string variable, and I'll start out the same way. So select A from artist A. But now I'll add a join, joining not to the table, but to the field I declared on the artist entity, which I called albums. I'll use the word album in the singular as my alias for this collection. Next, the where clause will match on an album name, so where album.albumName, like $1. So album is the album entity, and album name is a field on that class. At no time do I directly reference a database table or columns. The join condition is set up in the annotations for the albums field in the artist class, so I don't have to include the joined fields here, as you can see. I'll run this code. In this case, 5 artists were found that have a greatest hits album in this query. And now for good measure, I'll change this query slightly so that next I'll find any artist that has either a greatest hits or a best of collection album. To do this, I'll add an OR statement in the where clause after the first parameter placeholder, so I'll append the text or album.albumName, like $2. $2 is my second numeric placeholder. Instead of passing the second matched value as another argument to this method, I'll just hard code it in this code for simplicity. So I'll set parameter again on query, and the first argument needs to be the number 2. This will substitute the second placeholder specified by $2 with whatever I pass as the next argument. And for that I'll pass a string literal %, best of %. This will match any album with the text best of in any part of the album name. Rerunning this, I now get 16 matches for artists who've either got a greatest hits album or a best of collection of songs. You can see the last artist was the new one I recently added, Muddy Waters, and he's got an album, The Best of Muddy Waters, that matched this criteria. Okay, so this was a short introduction to JPQL, which I hope you found helpful. You can see why JPA and JPQL have become so popular in many Java frameworks. They certainly simplify some of the mechanisms needed to query data from a database with a Java application. I've listed a couple of useful links on this slide if you want to learn more about JPQL. These links will also be listed in the resources section of this video. JPQL is still a string that has to be interpreted and passed into executable code. The JPA criteria builder on the other hand, is a more object-oriented approach to querying with entities. In the next video, I'll introduce you to the Criteria Builder class and its related types as an alternative to JPQL. So I'll see you in that next video.